This is Geek Gab, the Geekerific Gabfest with your hosts, Brian Nehemiah Dornall and Daddy Warpig. We are back. That's right, Geek Gab, broadcasting as always from a secret bunker deep underneath the House of Geekery, normally once a week every Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Special time tonight, special day tonight, special episode tonight. We have noted author John C. Wright live on the air. And so, as is my usual wont, I'm going to pause for just a moment and take a sip of water and allow my co-hosts and our special guest to get a word in edgewise. Take it away, Dornall.
Hey everybody, good to be here. Thanks to our special guest. Glad to see you guys at a special time. I've got a lot to say, but I'll give Brian a chance to say hello.
He's not taking you up on your opportunity.
Mr. Wright, please.
My name is John C. Wright. I'm an author, philosopher, failed lawyer, ex-journalist, and all-around, nice is not the great word, all-around guy. And by round, I mean orotund and spherical.
Which answers a question somebody asked me on Twitter before we went live, which was, do you speak the same way you write? Apparently the answer is yes.
Orotund is a perfectly cromulent word. Everyone uses that word.
And Simpsons references, folks. That's what you're in for the next hour. Someone who can use words like
we're going to communicate all in Simpsons references like those guys on Star Trek who only talk about Dharmaka Jalagra.
Oh. We have Brian has rejoined us. Do you want to say hi, Brian? He is apparently experiencing technical difficulties.
He's trying to think of how to say hi with a Simpsons reference.
Maybe he's
excellent.
I can't play, guys. I'm not really good with Simpsons references.
That's quite all right. We can do it with Star Trek, Star Wars, or anything else with the word "star" in it.
Well, I'm sort of glad you brought up Star Trek because some asshole had the indecency of passing away on this special occasion when we had you on the show. I did want to say something about that.
I hope you will not refer to my childhood idol and my dearest exemplar that I try to impersonate my entire life as an asshole. At least the character, Mr. Spock, was always he was the only character in popular literature that represented self-control during an age when self-indulgence was the sine qua non of the culture. So I have the greatest respect for him. I'm very sorry to see him pass away.
Yeah, I would have said that, let's say, much less eloquently.
And more sarcastically. That, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to get a little personal for a second. I grew up in the military, and when I grew up in the military, my father was stationed overseas in Germany. I spent 8 years living in Germany, and they had precisely one English language station in Germany, so you watched whatever they had, and once a day during the weekdays they had Star Trek. And so I was introduced to science fiction in the form of books before, but Star Trek was my first visual introduction to science fiction, and I loved the show. I loved the characters, and Leonard Nimoy will be greatly, greatly missed.
Hear, hear, amen. I was also raised in a military family. My dad was Navy, and the Navy guys in that day and age used to keep crates of books that they would take with them on cruise, so that during the rare times between all their tasks, when they had bunk time, they could read a paperback or two, and they would want to get rid of them afterwards. So one of my dad's friends, knowing I was a bookish young man, and I think I was I don't know, 7 at this time, 8 maybe, 9, gave me a crate of books. And the book on the top of the crate when I opened it, and of course I hauled this up to my room like it was the treasure from Aladdin's Cave of Wonders, okay, like it was all the wealth of Croesus, or excuse me, all the wealth of Smaug for you guys who don't know who Croesus is. And so I ripped it open, and there, right on the top, was a book with a guy in a spacesuit on it, with the Earth in the background, and these faces of criminals and aliens and Romans and cavemen at the top. And it was Have Spacesuit Will Travel by Robert Heinlein. And I read the first line, and I was hooked. The first line is I had the spacesuit. It happened this way. Dad, I want to go to the moon. And how could you not? How could you not fall in love with the whole genre with an opening like that? I've never looked back.
My first science fiction book was Space Cadet.
Highland Space Cadet?
Yes.
Yep. I read some kids' books that might be considered science fiction before that, like Danny Dunn and the Small Flying Machine or Wrinkle in Time. But I don't know where you draw the line for where science fiction starts and ends.
I think Martian Chronicles was mine.
Your first science fiction?
Wow, that's heavy.
That I can think of.
Now, how old were you? Because that's a rather heavy book.
Yeah, I think I was a teenager. I don't recall reading any science fiction.
Yeah.
So I'm the oddball in this show. I actually don't do much reading for fun. If you're gonna delve into fantasy stuff, I couldn't tell you what my first one. If you count that as sci-fi, which
I do. It's all one genre.
Oh, then it could easily have been something like probably The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, maybe The Hobbit, something like that.
Yeah. And I've read both of those to my kids, and I can tell you that being a dad, one of the greatest joys in life is reading to your kids. I read every single night, except when Mom, of course, Crow wears me out of the way so she can read to them. And my day of finest accomplishment was when I read A Princess of Mars to the boys. And of course, they, being born here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, were delighted to find out how a Virginia gentleman is supposed to act when he's teleported naked to Mars after dying in an Indian cave. So, and they made a terrible movie out of it, by the way.
Did. Yes.
But it wasn't as bad as Bug Wars. It wasn't as bad as the Starship Troopers movie, though.
So many things I want to say about that, but I'm not going to.
No, that would be a blood pressure raiser and would probably dominate the conversation for far too long, far more than it deserves.
We might have actually talked about it before as well, so I probably have already had the chance.
I will merely say that Mr. Van Vierhoeven, or whatever his name is, personally insulted me by making that movie, and so whenever I see him, I will certainly slap him in the face with a glove.
I think I saw it in the credits. It was a thing, like if you stay at the end of the credits, you know, the fine print with the special thanks and everything.
Yeah.
And it was at the end, and it was at the end of the movie. It was like, with sincere hatred, fuck you, John C. Wright. That's what was right there at the end of the credits.
I think that was it. Watch your language, by the way. He certainly said that to Bob Heinlein there.
All right, I'm going to change the subject because it really does. It
raises my blood pressure. I hate that movie. I hate it with a pure, visceral, righteous hatred. Because that's one of my favorite books. You know, it's not much of a book. It's more like a lecture, but it's one of my favorite lectures.
It is, and actually this is really relevant to one of the next couple of points I was going to bring up anyway. The novel is structured not only non-chronologically in sequence and interspersed with literal lectures from the teacher in class.
Teachers or right.
But it does not have a coherent, intact story. It's a series of vignettes about, if I'm using that term right, about the life. And I love it. It's a great book. I got my copy in the 3rd grade from a sale of a library book that was so old it was gray and had the 3 proton, 6, 3 neutrons, 3 protons, 3 electrons, nuclear power symbol stamped on the side of it, stamped on the spine. That's how old the copy I got was in 3rd grade. Jagged, the pages weren't cut off evenly, had thick, coarse paper. I love it. Just love that book, the physical book and the novel itself.
Yep.
But why that is topical is because one of the things I want to talk about is the book I just read yesterday, one of your books, which is, and I have to make sure I get the title right because I keep on wanting to add a "the" on the front. There is no "though." It's just City Beyond Time.
Correct.
Tales of the Fall of Metachronopolis, and it is, and several stories in it are told out of chronological sequence, which for a novel whose central well, not a novel, but for a book with several novellas and short stories in it, its central mechanism is time travel is
Right.
entirely apt and apropos.
Right.
Is the Queen of Tyrant Lizards from your Book of Feasts and Seasons, is that actually set in the same cosmology as Metachronopolis?
No, negative. Because the time travel effect and the function and the way it's described work differently in those two backgrounds.
I noticed because someone on your blog had made the comment about that they were linked, and I was reading when I was rereading the Tyrant Lizard story this morning. I'm like, but there's no mist, there's no diffusion.
Yeah, there's no mist, and there's no separation of timelines into small and small timelines. The central premise of City Beyond Time is that if you abuse time travel, you slowly dissolve yourself. But the central premise of Queen of the Tyrant Lizards is that in a single instant, the time traveler has to make the decisions that affect her entire life and all the lives she touches. So it's a very different approach. They couldn't both exist in the same universe, though I suppose if we were in a multiverse where the different bundles of timelines had different laws of nature for how time travel worked, you could stick them together somehow. But no, they were not intended to be in the same background. However, they are in the same background as Jack Williamson's Legion of Time, and I will give a banana to anyone who recognizes all of the references I stuck into that story. That was one of them. Signora, I can't pronounce the name, that my main character is named after, is named after the dame in Jack Williamson's Legion of Time. And you guys might be too young to recognize that name or that book. It was one of the first time travel stories after H.G. Wells. It came out in like the 30s, back in the days when Pulp was king.
I recognize it's Jack Williamson's name, but not that book. My introduction to the pulps, and pretty much solely my entire education on that era, was Isaac Asimov's
The Golden Age.
Before the Golden Age, his anthology.
Right.
Oh, loved that book. I read that book twice, which is huge. It has so many stories in it.
Yeah. Good. It's good. I read it, as you can tell from the fact that I recognize it, I read it too. Yeah.
It is a portal into a time where attitudes towards science and other things, obviously, but attitudes towards science is completely different than modern attitudes. And if you're writing a book and you want to set it sometime in the early 30s, you could do far worse than to read that and absorb the unconscious attitudes.
Yeah. The modern madness had not yet struck. Yeah, they were a lot more sane in those days. Do I need to tell you which side of that question I'm on? No, I will say that a lot of things in the 30s that were popular among science fiction guys were not popular after World War II, because even guys like Doc E. Smith, who wrote the Lensman series, which if you haven't read it, let me recommend it strongly. It is maybe the pinnacle of the pulp era in terms of just the sheer imagination, the sheer size, the sheer scope of the space opera. He's the guy who really put the fat lady in the space opera, really put the size and scope into it. Doc E. Smith is his name, and in his earlier books before World War II, eugenics is always portrayed in a positive light. Do you guys know what eugenics is?
I do, yes.
Yeah, it's breeding humans like you'd breed horses. And of course, afterwards, when Hitler's idea of breeding mankind to make the Superman, to make the Ubermensch, was so discredited and so horrific, no one touched the idea again. For the best, in my opinion, of course. It's a horrible idea.
If you want to wallow in some evil for a second, I heard this awful thing about eugenics. Someone said, everybody thinks they're against eugenics until they have a daughter.
No, I think they said that about the dueling custom. Everyone is against murder until they have a daughter, because if you have a young man who comes to her to take her out and you don't like him, and you disembowel him with a shovel, you can use the same shovel to shovel out a shallow grave where his body will never be found.
Pro tip, everybody.
Oh, hey, looks like Brian...
Not that I've ever done that, mind you. My daughter hasn't gone out dating yet, but she's absolutely gorgeous.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Have you got your...
accessories too.
We're just talking hypothetically. Nothing can be proved.
Okay.
I mean, I'm also a failed lawyer, so you know, I know where to draw the line as to what I say in public.
It's the failed part I'm worried about.
Well, keep in mind that when I graduated from College of William and Mary, a fine school, by the way, I graduated 135th out of a class of 138 men, women, and mutants. So that means that somewhere in the Commonwealth of Virginia there are 3 lawyers who knew less than I do.
All right, I'm reassured. That's fine.
Do you want to say hi real quick, Brian? Brian's been having some technical difficulties getting connected to the show. We'll let him say hi finally.
Good evening, Mr. Wright. It is a pleasure to speak with you, sir.
Good evening. Is this the same Brian Nehemiah that I know from my blog?
It is.
Okay, I've never heard your voice before.
And your
Likewise.
telephone and your bedroom window, etc., etc.
You sound normal. Not that guy. Who was that talking?
Well, it's hard to recognize me without the ski mask muffling my voice. So.
Yeah.
And in the interests of full disclosure, Brian has hired El Jaggy Lamplighter, who is
Jaji. Yes, it's a Lithuanian Etruscan name that she made up herself.
Hired her to edit his still unpublished, will be indie published novel. So, just in the interest of full disclosure, there is a slight financial relationship, but that's not the reason why Mr. Wright.
Mr. Nehemiah is also a pal of mine, so, or at least a pen pal. You know, I've never borrowed money from him, but almost.
Well, you can call me by my Christian name. I do not mind. I think we've been.
Thank you.
Of course.
Oh no, you don't want to borrow money from Brian. He's got this cool thing it's actually a bucket for popcorn that gives you limitless popcorn. It's like the Stregonona of the movie theater.
Patent pending.
Wow, excellent.
So I'll go to Brian then. Did you have a pressing question for Mr. Wright?
Many. Oh, picking just one. Let's see what's the most germane to what we've been discussing so far. So, well, I know that Mr. Wright places a lot of faith in the mythology of the Greek muses. In fact, I believe that you've said more than once that they were baptized at a certain point in the past. So, do you have any advice?
Yes, what's the question?
Yes. Do you have any advice to help writers collaborate with their muses?
Yes. Screw your courage to the sticking place. Writing is basically the courage in the face of a piece of blank paper, or in the modern day, in the face of a computer screen with an empty file. The sacrifices that Ares, the war god, requires is, of course, the lives of young men. And the sacrifices that the other gods require are things that we take to be precious, but which we get from them, such as cattle or so on and so forth. But the sacrifice the muses require is your time, effort, and diligence. So either write, if you're going to be a writer, a certain number of hours a week, and always put those hours aside to do that and do nothing else, or a certain page count a week, one or the other. But stick to your quota. Now, the best way to do this is to marry a woman who will force you to stick to your quota, because behind every great man, there's an even greater woman shoving him into greatness. Otherwise, our natural tendency to eat popcorn and watch Simpsons comes to the fore. So my advice is be diligent. If you want more advice than that, I can go off on a long tangent, because this is something I've thought about a lot. Yes or no?
Well, good.
To be a writer, you must write. That's the main #1 quality and property. To be a professional writer, you must send out what you write, which means that if you get a manuscript back, either through the mail or electronically, you send it out again the same day. It does not ever sit a night on your desk. It sits on the editor's desk. If you are professional about what you want your writing to look like, you look up a book called Writer's Market, which is a reference guide that says who is in the market and who's buying what. And you follow their guidelines, because they put those guidelines in there to give you the ability to make your product suit what they're buying. So if someone says no vampire stories, don't send him the Nosferatu of Kyoto. If they follow the guidelines of what the editor says, when you get a rejection slip, be grateful rather than ungrateful, because you're going to get on average 100 of them. At least that's the way it was when I was first starting. It's been a few years now, so I don't know statistics-wise what it is. I don't even know if they send out rejection slips anymore, if everything's done electronically these days. But the reason why you're grateful is because that's feedback. the reason why I'm grateful is because non-writers don't get rejection slips. Non-writers have other problems. And so if you're a writer, you're going to get rejection slips. And the reason why to be grateful is because gratitude is the only thing that saves your life from being a continuous hell of misery. Gratitude is the one emotion that makes it so that life is always a pleasure, even if it's sometimes a struggle for it to be a pleasure. And after you get about 100, now, like I said, that's an average. So if Lester Del Rey sells his first story on his first try, which he did, then someone else, probably Ray Bradbury, is going to sell his first story after more than 200, which, as I recall, he also did. And that's Ray Bradbury, mind you, one of the greatest writers ever in the genre, and he did not sell his first story until like 1,000 rejection slips. Now, if you're not willing to accumulate 1,000 rejection slips, then find another line of work. That's my advice.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and in terms of being grateful for rejection, I came up with a little metaphor to help me toughen my skin, which is I think of form rejections as bronze medals, personalized rejections as silver, and acceptances as gold.
Excellent, because if you get a personalized rejection, that means you've taken a step up. That means the editor thinks you're good enough to explain his reasons for the rejection. And by the way, the rejection just means, if you're getting a personalized rejection, it usually means that he can't use your story this month because of whatever else is in his magazine. If he gets 3 stories that are excellently well written about unicorn veterinarians, he can only print one of them because the other stories have to be about space travel or time travel or something.
Indeed.
It has been, up until recently, it has been ages that I've even glanced through magazines, the actual science fiction magazines. The stories in them just disinterested me so much, but looking through them now, I just read there was a short story nominated for Hugo as part of the Sad Puppies slate, and one was Thaw, and the predecessor was Floor, or maybe it's the other way around. And so, being me, I went back to read the original story, even though it was not eligible for the Nebula, and because of that, I had to buy an episode of Analog, or an issue of Analog, and I flipped through that, and it is startling to me how much I wish that those magazines were still thriving, and how glad I am to see a new one starting up with Sci-Fi Journal. So
yeah. Then do your listeners know about either Sad Puppies or Sci-Fi Journal, or have you covered that in previous shows?
We had Larry on.
Okay. Did you talk about Sci-Fi Journal? Because that's a fascinating concept. It's science fiction philosophy, my 2 favorite subjects. Done by a guy named Jason Rene.
The very first time Brian came on the show, he was a guest, and he talked about he had just published his story in Sci-Fi Journal number 3.
Very good.
We talked about the journal, and we talked about his story, and things like that. So
excellent.
And I blushed.
Excellent.
But again, ethics.
You can't tell on the internet here. We're only seeing icons. I have not bought a science fiction magazine for at least 20 or 30 years. I don't think I bought one since the 80s. And I used to subscribe to Analog, and I used to. I think the last one I bought was Fantasy and Science Fiction, and only because a story of mine was in it, and I wanted to see it. And by the way, I was in the same issue as Ursula K. Le Guin, so I was cheek and jowl with one of the giants of the field.
I can't believe they didn't give you a contributor copy. Wow.
Oh, I'm sure they did, but I wanted to go buy it anyway, just to rack up the sale number or something.
Awesome.
No, they gave me a copy.
Awesome. Yeah, I will say I just subscribed to Analog, but because of another piece of writing advice I heard, which was authors should always subscribe to the magazines that they submit to.
Yeah, that's true.
I got my copy of Analog right here.
Very good. Who is the editor these days? It's not Mr. Schmidt anymore, is it?
Oh no, it is. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's Trevor Karachi, or starts with a Q.
I will show my age. Gardner Dessois was the editor when I was reading the magazine.
Oh.
And he was also my editor for one of the anthologies I appeared in back about a few years ago. So.
Wow. But I will say that the current editor of Analog has been nothing but professional and courteous to me, and haven't made so far, but I've gotten a couple of personalized rejections from him for the reasons you said.
And we've already established that's like a silver medal, so congratulations. Keep it up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a comment, and I was opening my mouth to say it, and it completely left my head, so I'm going to shut up again.
It's too late now because now we know you had a comment and then it left your head.
That happens a lot on the show. I get to embarrass myself on a regular basis.
I suspect it's the brains from the planet Eros, so there's no reason to be embarrassed.
We've got a comment from the chat. They want to know what that comment you were about to say is.
That's helpful. I'm trying to see if I can reconstruct the chain of the thought chain.
Like building a dinosaur out of finding only a toe bone. If you can just get back your missing thought.
Oh, thanks for reminding me.
Yes?
I've got an idea for something that we can add to the comments and to the links that Daddy Warpig adds. Daddy Warpig, look up the episode of Best of the Worst from Red Letter Media that features Tammy and the T-Rex. It's an all dinosaur episode. Trust me, it's relevant.
I also should add a link to...
It's relevant to If Only You Were a Lizard, My Love, which won a Nebula Award. By the way, I have no bones against that. It's not a bad story. It's just not science fiction.
Really? Because I would be interested in hearing why you think it's not a bad story, because it made me cringe. And I admit that may be due to my former profession as a political commentator, which is why politics is not something I talk about anymore, because I have sworn it off like an alcoholic swears off.
The story is only, in case the audience doesn't know, we're talking about a story called If You Were a Dinosaur, My Love by Rachel Swirsky, which won a Nebula Award. And it is a prose poem that is less than 1,000 words long. So it's not really a story. It's more like a vignette. And it's the plot is of a young woman who is mourning the comatose beating that her paleontologist husband has suffered. She's excuse me, I shouldn't say husband, a fiance. They were preparing for the wedding, and on their wedding night, he was beset by a group of stereotypical rednecks from the stereotypical South that only exists in stereotype land. And apparently, the paleontologist was a Arab bisexual Spaniard who was also a sissy because they hurled a bunch of epithets at him. An awkward line, I admit. They were gin-soaked. They were drinking gin, because all we here in the South drink gin. And I thought it was perfectly sad at the ending. I thought she achieved the emotional effect that she was trying to achieve in an adroit fashion. I don't think it was a great story. It was clumsy in places, including the place I mentioned. I don't think it's a story, and there's no science fiction in it. And I think the same effect could have been done more expertly if she had taken a little more time to do her work, which is why, in fact, I wrote a story called Queen of the Tyrant Lizards, where I was trying to show how you could do the same effect, even with the same theme, with the dinosaur story, but not have it be so negative and not have it be so unimaginative. Let me put it that way. If it's not science fiction, it takes place in this world, and you don't need much imagination to put a story in this world. I'm not saying you don't need zero imagination. Don't get me wrong. But science fiction readers and fantasy readers and science fiction writers and fantasy writers, that's our stock and trade. We're trying to make up a new world. Every other form of literature, you make up the plot, the characters, the action, the theme, and so on. Okay. In science fiction, you do all of that, but you also make up the new laws of nature, the new universe you're in that is not the same as the universe we presently inhabit. And that's what this author failed to do, and should not have won the Nebula. But I don't think it's a bad story. I don't think it's a great story either. But I don't think it's bad. It followed the same school of writing as If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, by having the first line of every paragraph be the last line of the previous paragraph.
Oh, you're right. It does.
But I've created a dead air by my comments. Any other questions, real quick? Did you think of the missing? Thought, Daddy?
I'm busy actually searching up links and plopping them in the liner notes because.
Okay, I've got her back. I came prepared.
Excellent. You got notes? You got questions for me?
Well, sure. Well, since we're talking about the merits of.
Okay, because I have a question for you. Suppose two trains leave New York at the same time. No, never mind. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So, I just wanted to know, in your opinion, can comic books, pulps, graphic novels, role-playing games be of equal artistic merit to novels?
Yes, certainly. Jack King Kirby was a genius, and just because there were pictures along with his story, does not mean his story was not as good or better as anything you would read in a magazine, even anything you would read in a literary magazine. I have very low opinion of modern literature. At about the year 1850 or 1880, somewhere in there, I think the literary world went barking at the moon, bat Giano, crazy mad, and decided to eliminate all supernatural, wondrous, astonishing, and magical elements from the stories. But if you read anything written before that, if you read King Arthur stories, if you read the Book of Five, not the Book of Five Rings, the Romance of Three Kingdoms, if you read the Mahabharata from India, if you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, if you read anything, you're going to find supernatural elements in the story. What we now think of as science fiction elements. Okay, you're going to find mythical elements. I propose to you that science fiction, the definition of science fiction, is nothing more or less than the mythology of the modern age, of the scientific age, and that we are the mainstream. And what's thought of as mainstream literature is actually a dead-end side channel that went off at a cocked angle to try to particularly do the types of stories that limited the human imagination to an unrealistically narrow view, the narrow view being stories that only concern this world and no others.
Yeah, Brad Torgerson has a number to the back you want.
I would certainly say comic books, role-playing games, what have you, are artistic. My role-playing game that I ran in school, which I have continued to run from that day to this, was what seduced my wife and got me the most happily married man on earth. So I certainly put a lot of art in that, and I'm a novelist. You know, I didn't skimp on what I was making up.
Outstanding. But yeah, Larry has a great quote about really science fiction and fantasy being the mainstream, which is if William Shakespeare were alive today, he would be writing the Avengers 2 and it would rock.
Yeah, I agree with him. If you're familiar with who Dave Wolverton is, he won the. He has an essay which I found floating somewhere on the web just on this issue, and he can give more detail than I can give off the top of my head as to who the writers were and what their socialist agenda was that was trying to make literature less fun and more socially relevant. And he's just the not Wolverton, but the rather famous editor for The Atlantic, I think it was the spearhead of this movement into modern dyspepsia, into this modern stomach ache of literature that we now have to endure. My son just got done reading Of Mice and Men, which is grim and gross from start to finish, and that book was apparently written with great skill. Don't get me wrong. The Steinbeck is a skilled author. It's unrealistic. Not every day is miserable. It doesn't rain every day. That's not realism. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't. And occasionally there's miracles. That's realism.
Amen. Yeah, I never developed much of a taste for Steinbeck, but yeah, I mean, this is me criticizing John Steinbeck, but
you have it right. You have it right, because I was forced to read him too, and I found out only this year that the reason why he's on all the book lists for schools is because he was the guy who was popular when my school teachers were young, when they were teenagers. So it would be as if modern school marms all assigned, let's say, Harry Potter or 50 Shades of Grey, because it was popular now. Okay.
Oh, it's gonna happen.
And John Norman will be vindicated. Sorry.
Yeah, so don't even get me started on school curricula now.
That's. Let me just say that homeschooling is a very wise practice.
Well, let me support that statement by saying that I almost wasn't here. I almost didn't become an author specifically because of my high school reading lists. I mean, it was.
Do you agree with me that they try to beat love of literature out of little kids with the way they approach it in these modern schools?
Unreservedly.
Very good. Very good.
Because it happened to me, and It was only by the grace of a friend letting me Frank Herbert that I escaped.
What happened to me is the teacher found me reading a book, opened up inside of another book that I was supposed to be reading, but was so impressed that I was... No, excuse me, belay that. I was writing a story and ignoring the class. And the teacher was so impressed that I was actually trying to write a story when all my fellow monkeys were not, that she let me slide. So that teacher, whose name I sadly forget, and I apologize for that, is the one to whom I owe my good fortune.
Phenomenal.
Because the teachers, by the way, the teachers are not in on this conspiracy. The teachers want to teach the kids, and they want to make teaching fun, but they're not allowed to. But then again, since I swore off politics for a Lent, let me change the subject to something else, or let you guys change the subject to something else.
I guess my saving grace was the fact that I'm easily bored. I have a very short attention span, and I get easily bored. And
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. What?
Let's go ride bikes.
Never found mundane literature, strictly mundane literature, with no hint of something fantastical, technology or magic or horror, whatever. I've never found that really engaging. It's never held my attention. And so
I can get by on history novels. If you read some of the early fantasy magazines, every now and again they'll throw in a straight historical, because dealing with the Romans fighting the Picts or something, you don't need to have a magician. That's exotic enough. But reading about something that's happening across the street, I mean, I could turn on the nightly news. I could walk across the street. What's the point?
Well, what's really interesting is, if you read histories that are old enough, how many elements of what we would call fantastical are presented there as just totally run-of-the-mill, like a Neil Gaiman.
I will give you my favorite example. You
Please.
guys are familiar with the writer Machiavelli, who is famous for having written The Prince, telling people how to seize power without regard to morals.
Yes.
Well, he also wrote a book in The Prince. In one of the later chapters, he mentions without any blush that the air, as some philosophers have maintained, that the air is people with spirits who, by dint of their superior intellects and their concern for mankind, will produce omens and prodigies to warn of the downfall of kings and other tumultuous events. I'm not quoting him word for word, but this is as close as I can get from the translation I read. And he, in the midst of this most pragmatic and most Machiavellian book ever written, casually mentions that omens and portents always accompany the downfalls of kings. So history books used to merely report, with the same way they'd report that King Henry attacked King Philip, that there was also a miracle at the convent, and that a boy was raised from the dead after being rescued from a stream, or whatever,
Yeah, like the ghost at the Battle of Salamis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't that kind of explain the popularity of all the comic book movies and everything these days? Is that we pride ourselves on being rational and everything in our daily lives, but the truth is we just can't get enough of that voodoo.
Except a belief in voodoo is perfectly rational if voodoo actually works.
Oh, yeah.
So if we are actually three-dimensional creatures living in a two-dimensional world, or four-dimensional creatures living in a three-dimensional world, then something in our hearts would always yearn toward that fourth dimension that we can't see, which we can also somehow sense in the back of our mind must be there. And of course, that yearning for the larger world, for, shall I say, our true home, is always going to call to us, even people who don't really know what that true home might be. I think the success of comic book movies is three things. One, the special effects have finally caught up with Jack King Kirby. Two, it's the only genre in which Hollywood is willing to tell heroic stories where the heroes are good guys, which otherwise is politically incorrect and is dismissed by the mandarins and the Brahmins that rule our culture. And three, comic books have always been mythologically grandiose and simple in their approach. Simple, but I don't mean simple stupid, I mean simple uncomplicated. Moses is put into a river, Superman is put into a rocket, they leave their families, they come and are saviors. You see where I'm going with this? And the Flash, for example, is Hermes. In the early version, in the Golden Age version, he dressed like Hermes. The Green Lantern was originally called Alan Ladd, but since it was a movie actor of the same name, they changed his name to Hal Jordan. But it's supposed to be Aladdin. He has a magic lantern and a magic ring because in the original story, Aladdin has a magic lantern and a magic ring. All these things are mythical. All these things are legends.
Yeah. And I understand what Dornall was saying, that in the common parlance, the term rational is used as a substitute for natural or mundane. I think that's where he was coming from there. Yeah.
Yeah, but the most rational person I ever read when I was in school was Thomas Aquinas. He was a paragon of logic, and he certainly believed in supernatural. Oh no, I understood what he meant, but I of course, being a Vulcan who's also a Catholic, I believe that it's perfectly rational to believe in a perfectly rational God. Because otherwise, how do we know the universe is rational? How do we know our brains match the patterns of logic we see in the universe? If we were created undeliberately by a natural process, we have no assurance that our picture of reality can match reality. But if there's a rational mind that created both us and it, then we are assured of there being a fit, of being a mate, of being a match.
Oh, you just broke my brain.
Sorry, did I mention I'm also a philosopher?
You did say something about philosophy earlier. I'm gonna jump in. Actually,
no, I'm actually someone who tried by means of philosophy to order his life according to a rational pattern and to cleave to virtue and to eschew vice, even since I was like 14 or so. So I mean, I'm not a guy who just debates the meaning of words for no purpose. I'm actually someone who tried to live that way.
Well,
whether successfully or not, I can't say.
I was gonna say that's pretty admirable because vice is pretty darn great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is the worm on the iron hook until the fish gets it in his frickin' mouth. Nice, juicy, lovely worm.
Writers and your metaphors. Hey, I'm gonna jump in.
The whole world's a metaphor, buddy.
No, my brain.
Even literal words, what we think of as literal, are actually just metaphorical words. If you take apart like the Latin roots of what they mean, it's all metaphor.
Wait, doesn't literal mean figurative nowadays?
Only among the unlettered and unlearned, yes, sir.
Oh, I'm gonna keep interrupting. We actually got some great questions from the chat. Bradford Walker here's trying to write a manuscript but can't stop asking questions. So I'm gonna start in with this question: when creating a story, where do you get the premise upon which you build that story? Is it one consistent source, or are there multiple sources that take turns throwing ideas at you?
If he's writing a story and he stopped to type on the internet, the answer is get back to work. The second answer is.
I'm sure he was writing during your lecture about
if he was writing with his left hand, then that's fine as long as he was typing with his right. The answer to the question is everyone gets story ideas all the time. You just don't notice it. Every writer I know, and I mean every single writer I know, carries either a notebook in his back pocket or in her purse, or nowadays a little electronic gizmo, whatever you modern people call your electronic calculating machines, Blackberries or whatever they are. And when you get a story idea, you write it down. And then when your time comes when you're facing that blank piece of paper that I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, that's when you pull out your notebook and you try to put some of the story ideas together and write them down. The actual ideas are quite easy to come across. Just read a book that you don't like and analyze why you don't like it. Look into the sky and wait for an idea to strike you. Go to Schenectady. That's where Harlan Ellison says he gets his ideas.
Schenectady, that's a nice place. I didn't get any ideas there.
One of the short stories in my Feast and Seasons takes place in Schenectady and stars Harlan Ellison as a guest star. I did not ask the good man's permission, but I mean it as an homage to him rather than as an insult.
See, that's what I was going to mention. Is I believe actually Harlan Ellison gets his ideas from time travelers. So
that's the premise of the story. Yes, the Science Fiction Writers Association of America has a vast mansion in the bottom of which we have H.G. Wells' time machine. I should say they, since I quit, and they just go to a few years in the future and pick up a newspaper and come back and write it up. That's where we get all our ideas.
I got another question because they keep coming.
Such as where did H.G. Wells get the time machine? If that's where science fiction writers get their ideas, excellent question.
What tropes in sci-fi fantasy?
He got it from Jules Verne. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What tropes in science fiction fantasy do you think need to lie fallow for a while, and which ones do you think are due for a return to prominence?
I'm in no way qualified to answer that question. It depends on what the audience is bored with, and I don't know what they're bored with or not. I write according to what the muse tells me to do. I just obey orders. I only work here. I don't set policy.
I'm pretty sure zombies are cratering.
Oh man, they have been. They have been for a while. Yeah. It's amazing The Walking Dead is so popular.
That's because the show is well written. It's written by the same guy who did the comic book Invulnerable, I think it's called. I can't think of the gentleman's name. A very, very skillful writer.
Just goes to show. It's not what you do; it's how you do it.
Exactly. That's why I can't answer that question, even though it's a very good question. Which is, if you do something well, if you take a theme as old as the hills, and you do it well, then it's a new theme. If you are, let's say you're J.R.R. Tolkien, and you take themes from the Middle Ages or from ancient epics or from Norse myth, which have been around since the 5th century or since they invented dirt, and you throw them together in a new mixture, doing it in the fashion of a modern realistic novel, then you'll write the best novel of the millennium. Or if you're, let's say you're Robert E. Howard, and you decide to take a historical novel like Solomon Kane adventure, and you decide to mix that in together with a weird tales, sort of Cthulhu mythos, strange tales, or you do it with a barbarian named Conan, then you've got a mix that people will be talking about for years after your death. See, and all he did was take two old ideas that had been done to death and combine them, and they're brand new. Because people have done heroic stories before, and people have done scary stories before, but to have your hero fighting Thagawa, the frog god, had not been done before.
There are a lot of science fiction tropes that have fallen by the wayside since the late 70s, mid to late 70s, and early 80s that I think if you were familiar with the writings of 1950s, 1940s science fiction, that you would find well to plumb those and see what's not being done now. The Heinlein Juveniles and his contemporaries, find out what they used to do that's not being done now, and write up that in a modern fashion that speaks to the modern reader, and I think you would find a great deal of success.
Maybe. I guess it depends on what you think a tropey is. Heinlein's attitude of can-do optimism is what's missing from most modern stories. By the way, the other reason why I'm disqualified is because I don't think I've read any science fiction since the 90s. Because as a professional, if I have free time, I write. And for my reading time, which I make every now and again, I've been rereading Edgar Rice Burroughs. I mean, I've been reading up on books that I haven't got a chance to read when I was a kid. I just today started on the third Pellucidar book, which takes place in the middle of an absurdly scientifically impossible hollow Earth filled with cavemen and better yet, cave girls. So.
Well, I think Dornall really hit the nail on the head. It's not so much the tropes or the themes that are being explored, but how they're being served or underserved. Because
let me give you another piece of writing advice. Everything that you can think of has been done before. And it's usually been done by Pascal or someone who writes better than you. But they never did it your way. And in the previous broadcast where you mentioned my name and therefore summoned me like a Russian summoning up the devil, you mentioned my theory that you are supposed to write books for the one guy who is going to read them, and you don't know who that one guy is. There's going to be some bored teenager who is having the worst day of his life, and it's going to be raining outside, and he's going to pick up your book on the sidewalk where someone threw it out because it was terrible. I threw it out the window, and to him that's going to be the book of gold. That's going to be the best book he ever writes. He ever reads, and it's going to change his life. And you're never going to know who that guy is, but he's the guy you're writing for.
You mentioned your reading time, and you're reading Edgar Rice Burroughs and a couple of other things. What about nonfiction? Is there any nonfiction that you like to read, or is there any nonfiction that you think helps you as a writer, helps your professional development?
Nonfiction that helps me as a writer. That's a stumper. I'll continue to talk so as not to have dead air time while I slowly think about that, staring up at the ceiling, wondering what that noise is in my house. No, I'll just say no. I've read Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire recently, and I've read a number of other history books by Paul Johnson. I recommend his History of the Christian People, and I recommend his. Oh, thank you. I recommend his. One of my slaves just brought me a drink. I recommend his. I'm sorry, I'm kidding. It's a Munchkin from Oz. No, I'm so kidding. It's one of the clones that we grew in the vat.
Oh, come on!
It's my son. Who's just found out right now that he was born in a vat. He's shocked.
Not adopted. You're good. You're not adopted.
No, only one of my kids is adopted. My beautiful daughter, the princess. I would say that everything is grist for the mill. Any writing, anything you read, will turn out to be useful. Usually when I'm in the process of writing, nowadays with the thanks to the internet, thank you Al Gore, this gigantic calculating machine that you have that allows you to get lies from all over the world instantaneously, also allows you to do the kind of research that you'd have to get a librarian to help you, over the phone or something for weeks to do, and I can do it in a few minutes. Ever since I found out that there's a giant star passing through our area at space at 8% of the speed of light, with a trail streaming behind it of its solar atmosphere, its photosphere, that's 13 light years long, I determined never again to make up any astronomical wonders, because they are enough real ones that I can put them in my books, and there'll be things that people are going to go, that can't be real, and they all are, with one exception. I turned one star into antimatter in order to make it a MacGuffin. But in real life, the star, which is made of solid diamond, neutronium diamond made of a degenerate matter, actually exists, and it's about 50 light years away. I got the distance. The distances are all correct in my books.
Good Lord, that's one thing that I like, because I've been reading the Count Eschaton sequence, and I have been reading some more recent science fiction. And what you do that I find lacking almost everywhere else, except perhaps like Gene Wolfe and Mike Flynn, is take a big idea, and just let it loose to run where it will and follow it no matter where it goes.
Like a man hunting, like a caveman hunting a mastodon. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. See, everything's metaphors. I guess that's just because of the books I read when I was a kid. They were all big idea books. They weren't any of this socially relevant, socially conscious, hit me in the head with a hammer, please, to stop the pain kind of modern books that I don't like so much. Oh, and thank you for the compliment. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for writing it.
You're welcome. When I appeared in an anthology called the Best of the Year #3 that was edited by David Hartwell, I found to my surprise and shock that my story and a story by Ray Bradbury were the only ones that took place in outer space. All the other stories there were Earthbound. And it was my first story that I sold. It was called Guest Law, where I simply retold a Greek myth in outer space.
Where would you recommend that new readers start? Where's a good entry point to your work?
I recommend that they start by reading Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe.
Writing that down.
The man opens up with torture. That's strong play, man.
It's a Book of the New Sun. There's
Book
4
of the
of
New
them.
Sun. Correct. There's 12 of them, but there's 4 of the New Sun books, and then there's 3 more Long Sun books. I think he has a Borrowed Sun, an Old Sun, a New Sun book, and 1 or 2 other Sun books. They're all excellent, and they're all incomprehensible. He's smarter than I am, so I can't figure out what he's doing. But his incomprehensible works are so much better than many comprehensible books I've read that I don't stint him that.
Well, thank you. I've written down on my little notebook that I do keep at all times.
Aside from that, I'd recommend reading Jack Vance, Dragon Masters and The Last Castle by Jack Vance, and then read Highland Juveniles. And then after you're done reading them, you might get around to me, but I'd start with the Masters first. Read World of Null A by A.E. Van Vogt, and then read Players of Null A by A.E. Van Vogt, and then read My Null A Continuum. Because when I decided to be a science fiction writer at age 9, I never dreamed, even in my most ambitious and wildest dreams, that A.E. Van Vogt's Widow, my favorite book by my favorite author, would give me permission to write a sequel, which I did thanks to the hard work of David Hartwell and of the Van Vogt estate. And it's very sad because Van Vogt was what used to be one of the big 3. Asimov, Heinlein, and Van Vogt were the 3 writers was on everyone's lips, and almost no one has even heard of Van Vogt anymore. He's really fallen out of style. And usually they'll say Arthur C. Clarke or they'll say Ray Bradbury. Both excellent writers, but not as wild and imaginative as Van Vogt is.
What book of yours is a sequel to those?
Null A Continuum. See, because he wrote on a ever-increasing scale. The world of Null A takes place on Earth, and Players of Null A takes place in the galaxy. And so my Null A Continuum takes place in the... I blow up the entire universe before the end of the book.
I actually have both Null A books by him on my reading list as research material for my role-playing game.
There's I hope you're running a Null role-playing game. I want to play. There was a third Null book that he wrote in the 1980s, but it's not up to his par. And much as I love A.E. Van Vogt, and much as I read everything he's written except for his true confessional stories that he wrote under other names. I mean, I've literally written everything this guy's written. I don't recommend that one, not the third one. I used one or two ideas from it, but I didn't write a sequel to that. Does that make sense? I kind of ignored it the way you ignore the second Highlander movie if you're making a Highlander sequel.
Yeah, I just did a blog post about the Aliens movie. They're a sequel apparently in development. They're ignoring the third and fourth Aliens movie and sticking with the first two that everybody likes.
They're wise. They're wise. Because you can't kill the little kid off stage between the two movies. That's just a slap in the face of the reader. Look, if you're a writer, you want more writer advice? Your patrons, your readers, your viewers, they are your bosses, okay? You treat them the way you treat your boss. You put on your tie. You just speak with them with respect. You don't belittle them. You don't argue with them. You know, they're your employers. You're grateful to them because they could do something else with their book buying dollar than read the trash you're putting out. I don't mean you personally. I mean the royal you in general. And be grateful.
We have about 4 minutes left in the show.
And you didn't even ask me any hard questions. Don't you have some real rip-roaring questions? Like, didn't you steal all your ideas? The answer is yes. I stole them from the greats. Great authors steal ideas from greats. Limited authors steal ideas from limited writers. That's the way it works.
In fact, you stole an idea from Daddy Warpig earlier. He almost got to say it, and then he just forgot it.
That's because the brain from the planet Eros that I mentioned earlier in the broadcast actually works for me. And that's where I get my ideas. I get them.
You've been stealing my thoughts.
That's true, and your luck, and all your good luck has now been deflected by a giant space mirror to me.
We have actually touched on every single topic that I had sat down and
Can you show me on an anatomically correct doll where I have touched you? Oh no, I'm sorry. The topics. Well, we're almost out of time, so I guess that's a good place to run out of ideas. Is near the end.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Leonard Nimoy. We talked about You're Not a Fan. I didn't mention exactly where that is, but you excerpted part of it. We talked about Queen of the Tyrant Lizards, City Beyond Time, current city series for tours, and role-playing games, all of which, by the way, the only people who have this list are me and Mr. Wright, and primarily Brian, who's been asking the questions, has gone not quite in order, but pretty close through all of these topics without knowing didn't know anything about it. So
well, as an author, I'm obligated to make a shameless plug for my latest book, which is coming out in a month or two, which is the fourth book in my Count to an Eschaton series. And if your listeners are not familiar, the Count to a Trillion books. And by the way, I made up that title before the national debt was in the trillions, so no one used that word except for astronomers. But now, so the book doesn't sound as awesome as it's supposed to, as when I made it up. It did. The premise there is that Earth finds out that we're in the backyard of some highly advanced alien species and that we kind of belong to them. And the only way to get out of the indenture, because it turns out that our entire arm of the galaxy was seeded with protoplasmic life particles, we have to win our freedom. We have to go to the front office. But the front office is in the globular cluster at M3, which is 33,000 some odd light years and change away. And there's no faster than light drive in my universe. So, because of a mistake and a tower falling down on his head, my main character is trapped at home while his wife, on their wedding night, by the way, has to go off on the only starship in existence to M3 and come back. And he's got to wait all that time and keep the human civilization not only intact, but at a high enough technological level to decelerate the return ship, because these are sailing ships. You keep your engines at home. You just use a launching laser and an acceleration laser to launch and slow the ships. And the humans have discovered psychohistory, an idea I stole from Asimov. Oh wait, are we out of time?
Finish.
Someone asked me where I got my ideas. I get them from not liking what some other writer has done. When I read Isaac Asimov's book, I realized that I was not rooting for the psychohistorians because they were trying to erect a second galactic empire. And who wants to be a citizen of an empire when you can be a citizen of a republic? So I decided that one of my psychohistorians would be a Texan. I would not take no pox off of no imperialists. Thank you very much. And so the the two groups of psychohistorians are battling using history as their weapons to try to shove the course of events one way or the other way. That's the premise of the book.
And to raise the stakes even higher, he's running out of coffee.
Yes, he's running out of coffee. I see you read it.
Okay, so we are out of time. I'll let John and Brian and then Dornall say whatever they want before I wrap up.
Flunagui Mogalnaf Rulie Cthulhu Wag Noggle Fathagan?
Good enough.
Anything I want?
I think you just did.
Okay.
Brian, do you have anything final to say?
Yes, just this has been quite a ride and an unmixed pleasure, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Sure.
But thank you, Mr. Wright.
We'll do it again tomorrow because this tape will probably get destroyed accidentally by Daddy Warpig.
Fortunately for everyone in the world, this is being backed up on somebody else's server and not mine.
There we go. There we go. No one's going to spill coffee on the server because technology never fails. Dornall, you want to say goodbye?
Hey, thanks a lot for coming on. That was a great show. It was good to get in a special edition here. Thanks to all our listeners and fans and everything. And have a good night.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
And just to let everybody know, we will still be doing our regular show on Sundays because this is a special episode. And so tune in Sunday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. By the way, links to all the things that we've talked about are now in the liner notes. So Sci-Fi Journal, If You Were a Dinosaur, My Love, Queen of the Tyrant Lizards, which was written as a better version of that, if I am allowed to say
written
so.
Written in one day.
Yeah.
Written in one sitting.
Tammy and the T-Rex, Red Letter Media,
Yes.
which relates to both of those, and
Yes, it
the
does.
Amazon link to Count to a Trillion, which is his current series being published by Tor Books, and of course links to his blog and his other publisher. Links to the Twitter accounts of your hosts, Dornall, Brian Nimoy, and me, Daddy Warpig. Links to Brian's personal blog, and links, of course, to the House of Geekery, daddywarpig.com. Follow us on Twitter, check out our blogs, and by all means, check out Mr. Wright's books because they are excellent. I am Daddy Warpig. Thank you all for turning in. I will see you Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Me, my co-hosts, and Mr. Wright are signing off. We will be back.